Welcome back to the Mayhem Performance Podcast. We're coming at you guys with a bunch of stuff on muscular endurance. And Brandon's going to kick us off.
Just throwing it.
That was perfect.
That was fantastic. Yeah, we actually had a podcast with Sean when he was in town about this topic. We were kind of talking about like differences in aerobic training and how everyone's like, oh, I just need to become like more, quote unquote aerobic. And then we kind of said, well, most people in the sport actually need to have more endurance, like local muscle endurance to be able to do the skills. And then we had a ton of questions. I know I got a couple people that emailed me after that podcast. And so this has kind of been on the back burner, but we wanted to circle back and have a bigger conversation or a longer form conversation on what is muscular endurance in the sport of CrossFit, how to identify the limitation, and then how do you actually train it. Like, we want you guys to walk away with some like true application, some principles, and let's do a toolkit on this. I'm just throwing you under the bus, Jake. We got to do another toolkit video. We'll do one on muscular endurance, kind of show you guys different progressions for different levels of athlete. The first thing that I think that you need to look at as an athlete for any of these limitations that you may have is finding whatever that rate limiting step is. And we've talked about this in several podcasts, but essentially it's like, what's the lowest hanging fruit that's slowing you down in your progress? And for muscular endurance, a lot of people come to me and they're like, my legs just absolutely blew up in this thruster burpee workout. I just couldn't do the thruster anymore. But the first question that I ask them, instead of like, oh, it's just muscular endurance, is, well, what's your 1RM front squat? What's your 1RM thruster? Do you know those? And typically, those that are really struggling with that either have a strength limitation or they have a movement limitation. So if we started with strength as like this first rate limiting step, if you're doing a thruster, 95, 65 in the open, and that weight is above, let's say like 30 to probably 40% of your 1RM, you just need to get stronger. Otherwise, you're just never going to be as enduring as you want to be in the thruster, and especially in workouts where there's 50, 60, 70, even over 100 thrusters in an open workout, right? On the other side is maybe you're strong enough, but you do the workout and you still blow up. Then my next question, or what I will assess in an athlete, is how are they moving? And we see this all the time, especially with super tight guys that played football or other sports. The barbell's off the front rack position. They can't get into the squat without having to hold their breath. If there's a movement restriction, then that's the lowest hanging fruit, and you should fix that first. So before we even talk about muscular endurance, you guys listening to this podcast, do you have a strength limitation? Is it you're just too weak to be able to handle the movement that you have to do? Or do you have a movement restriction? If you can get past both of those things, like you move really well, you're strong enough to do the movement that's prescribed in the sport, that's then when we talk about like true muscular endurance protocols. So that was me yapping a little bit. If you guys want to fill in a little on that before we move on.
Oh, yeah, it's good. I think of the open workout that was row wall ball, 15-minute AMRAP. I can't even remember doing that, and it was mainly a leg limiter than it was even breathing. Like, there was obviously breathing in there, but I was aerobic enough at the time to complete the workout. And I was probably front squatting like 375 for a 1 rep max. And I could probably like row a 2K in like 645-ish. So, like, what the heck? Why are my legs going up? It's like a wall ball is, right? Like,
yeah,
what?
20 pounds, yeah.
50%, 10% of my front squat or something less. Right? I don't know. My math sucks, but it's like that's an exact workout where like that would come into play. And it's like, how am I going to train to be good at that now that I have all the prerequisites necessary?
Yeah.
Like, to make my quad stop blowing up.
Yeah. Just to kind of circle back to the movement limitation real quick, because I had people in that workout tell me, man, my legs blew up. But then I watched the video and they can't get into a clean squat position. So first, if that is you as an athlete, instead of even thinking about like, I'm going to do a ton of leg endurance work or ton of rowing work, fix the positions so that you can raise your ceiling, so that then we can raise your potential. Just keep that order in mind, because it really does matter. Otherwise, if you don't fix the position, you could do all the best protocols for leg endurance or the best protocols for strict handstand push-ups or ring muscle-ups, and they won't get that much better because you're not fixing the actual limiting step in the chain.
It's good.
No, I would just say, I mean, I was the opposite. I was okay at muscle endurance, like in my quads in particular, but you took a workout like the quarterfinals a couple years ago with the 225 front squat. Well, like all-time front squat's only 320. I'm ashamed. I'm sorry. Yeah,
You're a marathoner, man.
I know, right? But at the time when I was doing, like, even then, it was probably like my front squat at the time was probably like a 275. And so that workout just buried me. But I could probably have done pretty well in the wall ball workout with somebody like in a row, right? Because like, yeah, like my legs still had pretty good muscular endurance. I wasn't marathon training at that point. I was still doing some CrossFit. I just wasn't doing heavy squats anymore. But that was such a high percentage relative to my 1 rep max that it was like, I mean, it just buried me. Me and Jake Locker did it together, and it was the same thing for both of us. We had just not been doing heavy squatting for, at that point, like 2 years. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that it's just such an important point as we dive into these particular topics, to almost always rewind and come back to that framework of going, can you get in, like, do you move well? Like, you know, do you move efficiently? Movement economy, number one. And then number two is like, it goes back to the skill conversation we were just having. Like, are you misidentifying what your actual limiter is? Right. But now assuming, okay, let's say it is truly muscular endurance, to go back to Dom's example of the wall ball, how would you go about training it?
Yeah, and there still can be multiple limiters because different athletes are exposed to different things. They have different training backgrounds. Maybe someone was an endurance athlete and they're coming into the sport versus someone that's a football player. They're probably a little bit more powerful and they have like a little higher threshold nature to them where everything's explosive. And so you need to learn how to regulate those athletes to, again, be as efficient as they can at all the movements. But kind of there's, I think, 5 key factors in thinking about muscular endurance, and these are like more of the scientific principles. We won't dive into any of these, but one, you need to have good mitochondrial density. Like, you have to be able to have more mitochondria in the muscle to be able to effectively utilize the oxygen so that you're not like blowing up and then you're just staring at the wall because you can't do any more.
Mitochondria is the
powerhouse of the cell, right? Like, that's essentially what's going to help you get more ATP to create energy, the currency of energy, so that you can do the movement that you want to do.
Quickly, how do you build mitochondrial density?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. There's a plethora of ways, which the nice thing is in CrossFit, you're doing all these things. So long, slow distance work, easy cyclical intervals, moderate cyclical intervals, or just mixed intervals in CrossFit will all help. The one thing you don't want to do is overtrain. And a lot of people just do true high intensity work every single day, and it's going to be really hard to create mitochondrial biogenesis that way. The next one is capillary density, which, again, not dive into the scientific side of this, but the capillaries are going to help us deliver and get the oxygen into the muscle tissue. Having more obviously allows the oxygen to get into the tissue, which then allows us to be able to have more energy, which is what we need to be able to use our legs or our arms or anything in CrossFit. Same rules apply there. The nice thing is that you could do both of those at the same time. Like, I'm building capillary density and mitochondrial density by doing a lot of just the basic work that your coach is prescribing to you, or if you're just following a quality CrossFit program. Again, the key here, though, is that you're not overtraining. Like, I think the tendency with most people is they're just always going hard, and it's really hard to actually create more density that way.
Real quick note on that, too, is just driving on the point that you can literally increase the amount of capillaries, right? Like that, I always say capillary, I might say capillary, thereby increasing the amount of blood that you're getting into the tissue, which is just crazy to think. Like, you would almost think just like you have a set amount and it's done. You're actually creating more channels to get more blood into the tissue to continue to create more energy.
Totally. The third one would be the ability to buffer the hydrogen ions or the waste byproducts, like just teaching your body how to be more efficient at getting all of the, what we used to call lactic acid, that burn feeling out, right? Like, the best athletes in the sport, you'll notice this in workouts where like they can do a couple really fast reps, they kick down, and then immediately they can do a couple more fast reps. Like, their ability to buffer those hydrogen ions allows them just to be so much better at the sport. So practicing that, and this is harder to do if you're doing long, slow work. You don't want to do that to improve this. You would do a lot of high intensity intervals. So again, CrossFit does cover that, and we're going to give you guys some progressions in a second, or ways to think about muscular endurance training. The fourth would be motor unit recruitment. This, we actually touched on this in the skill development podcast that we did, but you think about it like a motor unit is essentially the nerves that are contracting the certain muscle fibers that are connected to that one unit, right? In CrossFit, we don't want to take that 95-pound bar, especially if my clean's 315, and try to clean it like a 1RM. That means I'm using every single motor unit in my body to get that bar to my front rack, and I'm using all of this extra energy. You want to teach your body how to be super efficient to where it becomes like really cyclical when you're doing that 95-pound clean. Essentially, everything in the sport, in my view, should be cyclical. And it's funny, Dom, James Sprague just called you, and you talked in another podcast about watching videos. I just watched his clean and jerk video, the 5 intervals where they did the shuttle run, clean and jerk, and burpees. and his clean and jerk looks so smooth. I don't know if you watched his or not, but like he's not doing a power clean. Like he just kind of is doing like this pseudo dip under. It's just, I don't even know how to describe it. No contact on the thigh, just dip under it real quick, and then like a really soft press. And you could tell that he was trying to minimize the amount of effort that he's putting into the barbell. That's a great lower threshold strategy, just basically lowering the effort because he's strong enough to do that 135 like that.
And I cannot tell you how much that guy has worked specifically on a workout like that.
You could tell.
3 years.
Yeah, you could tell.
Like Gretel, a workout like Gretel used to be like the bane of his existence. And that's actually why I went and watched it, because I was like, I got to see how much better he's gotten at stuff like this.
And it looked really, really good. I mean, and the thing is, too, is like he's pretty long. Like there are a lot of shorter guys, smaller guys that should be faster at cycling, and maybe they were the first couple of rounds, but because he was so efficient, he was able to stay pretty consistent in the workout. So the whole point there is that you can teach your body through training, like basic EMOMs or, again, intervals where you're focused on trying to use less effort per rep. Essentially, that's the concept of movement economy or movement efficiency. And then that fifth one, and Jake, you'll love this, is just really like substrate availability, right? Having enough glycogen to be able to actually utilize it in a workout.
We could just talk about nutrition for 20 seconds.
Where you're not always depleted. But, I mean, it matters, right? Like if you want to become more enduring in the sport, you can't just go in fasted state all the time and trying to train hard. I thought you were going to say something.
I'm holding back. I'm just trying to hold back.
Fasted cardio.
Yeah. It is crazy how many people still do fasted CrossFit in the morning.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Right.
Like
Well, I mean, look,
I don't get it.
If you just are doing it for health and wellness, whatever.
I'm talking about performance.
Performance, yeah. It's a bad idea. So we're not going to dive into those. We do that in the mentorship. Like we're going to walk through each of those and how to actually build those separate to muscle endurance. But for now, I just wanted to got two great minds with me to talk about like strategies that you can build muscular endurance in the sport of CrossFit.
Can we go like upper and then
nutrition?
Lower?
Oh, okay. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, we should probably maybe land the plane there
at some point
when we finish. Like when we finish, because if you're not putting that in, forget it. But like upper muscular endurance and lower muscular endurance.
Let's do it.
What about it? Wait, what do you mean?
No, just like how you would. I'll ask you first. Like how do you build out? How are you building out a little bit of like upper muscular endurance for someone who blows up on high volume handstand push-ups at the end of a workout? Or let's even use the semifinal workout that just came out, like the handstand walk into the ring muscle up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like feeling the muscular endurance fatigue in their shoulders. Some other people were also feeling grip from holding the back squat. I didn't really hear a single person talk about their legs. Like, how are you helping someone with upper muscular endurance in a workout like that?
Yeah, I think if we just to think about principle based first, I'm always, and I get this from Sean, which is like, I'm gonna do simple until simple stops working, right? Or Sean would always use the analogy of like, I'm gonna play like one card at a time, right? So for example, what I mean by that is like we have so many protocols. Muscle endurance is so fun for me because there's so much you can do. Like this morning on our coaches call, we were talking about handstand push-up progressions and programs, and we all had a different idea, and they're all good ideas, right? And all of them would probably work, right? So it's like, and I talk to coaches about this all the time because I actually think this is a coaching conversation, but this is where coaches get hung up on program design efficiency. I don't think they're like, I don't know what to do. It's like, I have so many things I could do. I don't know which one to choose. Right. I think that's where athletes go wrong too, because I have so many things and they do too much at once. I would say to the athlete, to the coach, start simple and do simple until simple stops working. So for handstand push-up muscle endurance, it also depends on the training age, right? If I have a lower training age individual, beginner, intermediate, I'm definitely going to start with simple. Connor was talking about it this morning. I'm going to give maybe 2 days a week of just building volume with strict handstand push-ups. Yeah. And I think that he gave a good percentage this morning of starting somewhere around 40 to 50-ish% of your 1 rep max, right? So if you can do 10 strict unbroken handstand push-ups, I'm going to start at 4 to 5 reps, and I'm just going to build the amount of sets that I do, right? I'm going to get up to, you're like, how many would you do? I don't know, roughly sport-specific volume. So maybe that's like 40-ish, right, in a session. And then I'm going to drop the sets back down, add reps. So now I'm doing 6 reps by 5 sets, and then eventually 8 reps by 4 sets or whatever. And I'm going to do that 2 days a week. I'm just going to keep it really simple. If I get an athlete who's a little bit more like higher intermediate, more advanced, that's when I'm going to start to pull in more protocols, which we get a lot of the ideas from the bodybuilding community, right? Shout out to the bodybuilders for giving us a lot of these ideas of doing things like strip sets and drop sets and mechanical advantage drop sets. So, an example we gave this morning was like, how would we get somebody from 15 strict handstand push-ups to 30 strict unbroken? And Dom and I were talking about, Dom's always got such good ideas with this, but like doing a mechanical advantage drop set, meaning increasing mechanical advantage of the movement as you go. So you might start with a strict handstand push-up, and then you might rest do as many as you can, leave 1 rep in the tank, rest 30 seconds, maybe even 60 seconds, and then go to maybe a box pike strict handstand push-up where you can do a few more reps. You increase the mechanical advantage of the movement, so you can do more, rest 30, 60 seconds, and then maybe go to like a feet elevated push-up, right? Rest a couple minutes, do it 2-3 sets. So again, I'm just thinking, I'm kind of working on a continuum based on somebody's training age. The younger they are in training, the less that they've done, the more simple I start with, the more advanced they become, the more advanced protocols I'll pull out, like drop sets, strip sets, pre-exhaust, post-exhaust, all those sorts of things.
The other thing you can do too, like even with your example, is manipulate the rest times. So like if it's something as simple like straight linear sets, maybe you did start at 40% of someone's max and you're resting 2 minutes between. So it's not like true what you think of as muscular endurance, but then you're just trying to build some volume. And then 2 weeks later, now it's rest 90 seconds. And then 2 weeks later, it's rest 60 seconds. And then 2 weeks later, it's rest 30 seconds. Now it's like, wow, I'm basically kicking up, doing handstand push-ups, kicking down, and then I got to go again. And it simulates more of what the sport is, and you're actually building that muscular endurance.
This is not a principled progression, because this is actually to give you guys like an idea, if you're an athlete at home going like, how would I build my handstand push-up muscle endurance in the off season? The way I like to think of it is like volume, then intensity, and then capacity, right? And so I've used that with conditioning a lot, and I've applied it to muscle endurance. I'm going to build the total amount of work that I do. So I'm going to get up to doing 40, 50 reps in a session. And then I'm going to add some intensity, and maybe that is some pre-exhaust, where I, blow out my shoulders a little bit, and then I go do handstand push-ups, so I'm forced to use my triceps a little bit more. So maybe I do like an isolation movement on the shoulders, like a dumbbell front raise, maybe even something a little bit more compound than that. And then I jump into the handstand push-up, and then I'll have a period where I go back and go, okay, now I'm going to do capacity, where I just cut the rest down. And I define it as doing the same amount of work in less overall time. And that little progression right there, like, kind of helps me wrap my head around like a macro progression for muscle endurance.
And it starts looking more and more like CrossFit, to your point.
For sure.
Like that's the whole concept of work capacity in the sport of CrossFit, is like, we're just trying to get more work done in less time, and eventually we'll get there. And then once you can do it, that's when you start putting it into the sport. Now we can do handstand push-ups in a 15-minute AMRAP, and you'll feel more comfortable doing that.
How do you guys work in, like, I think a lot of people maybe outside of an individualized coaching space, when we see in CrossFit, we see a lot of things like lower pull, upper push paired together, or lower push, upper pull paired together, like a Fran or a Diane type of thing. And I think in the CrossFit space, a lot of that is done to increase intensity. Because then there isn't interfering muscle groups. But I think as you get to the higher levels of our sport, we're starting to see more and more like purposeful interference in the programming. And so how do you guys decide when you're working with athletes, like when to pair like handstand push-ups and muscle-ups together, or handstand walk and maybe like a barbell clean and jerk together, where there's like a pressing movement and a like straight arm shoulder fatiguing movement?
I'll let Brandon answer it, but I'll just to kind of like hammer that home a little bit more. I would say, I was talking to a coach that I mentored Friday, and I was telling her, like, that's probably one of the biggest things I've changed in the last year. I think is my background in more general fitness, like working in the affiliate we owned, doing a lot of personal training, working with a lot of people who didn't care about CrossFit or even know about it. And I was always so careful. Like, you're always like minimizing interference, right, to keep intensity high. Right. You're like, upper push pull, not even that. It'd be like bend, press, squat, pull, right? Like upper lower splits and things like that. And then in CrossFit, I like that bias just carried with me, right? Like if I looked at a workout, I'm like snatch and handstand push up, like the Rogue qualifier, 2 years ago, I'd have been like, I would never program that, in a combination. It was actually when Dom came here and I started looking at Dom's programming and your muscle endurance programming in particular, that I was like, what's crazy is that the workouts, the qualifiers and the events didn't even get me to change. It was more just looking at Dom's programming and going,
oh, this makes sense.
Probably too much of it. But
well, to be honest, it was like me going, this is stupid. Like not like dumb, but like, man, this is crazy. This is so much volume on people's shoulders. And then all of your athletes are getting better. And then I start looking at my own training and I'm like, wow, I'm really actually doing my athletes a disservice. And I'm not actually including enough interference into their training. Now, granted, at the right time, which is what you're asking about, but Brandon, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I still have a process, and we can add this to the toolkit of kind of thinking about what stage of the season you're in and also what stage of athlete you are. You still would want to start without interference to kind of build the volume, the capacity, the strength, all those things in that movement. So if we're using handstand push-ups as that example, there's some time where it's in a non-fatigue state, just like we talked about with strength endurance in the toolkit that we did, where it's like just snatches as we're building strength endurance for snatches. You would want some of that. And then eventually we kind of slowly start getting into more sport-specific work, and that may work for me. That may look like mixed cyclical work that's going to fatigue the shoulders, ski erg, into handstand push-up work, or even rowing into handstand push-up work, where it's still not a ton of interference, but there's some. And the interference that is really happening is that now, because your heart rate's a little bit higher and blood is going all over your body, it may not get to the shoulders as fast as you want it to, or you may feel a little bit of occlusion going from the row into handstand push-ups where you feel that pump. And so now you got to learn how to work through that. Then the third stage of that is to create interference. And I think about it as two things, just real quick. Interference would be a movement that, like let's just say with handstand push-ups, that fatigue the shoulders, but it's not another shoulder movement. So that would be front rack, walking lunge into handstand push-up, or
double under maybe even.
Double under into handstand. Those are great.
Yeah.
There's also in CrossFit this trend now for redundancy. So you actually may see handstand push-ups and burpees where both are triceps and shoulders. And so I think about it in these kind of two categories. I put them together all the time, but you need to make sure that you're training as an athlete for both of those things. Some are just interference, double under into handstand push-up, and some may be, I got to do 50 handstand push-ups, I row a little bit, now I got to do 50 burpees, and I row a little bit, and I got to do another 50 of something else that's all shoulder. Yeah, thrusters, where it's all shoulders, and that's that same movement pattern. So you need to be good at all of those things. When we get to that performance side of the sport, I like to have fun with it. Like, I look at old workouts and I'm like, what was tested? What was the contraction volume? And then I'll write intervals or AMRAPs built to where we can do a 3-minute AMRAP of those movements, rest to recovery, and repeat that so many times. And the cue that I give my athletes is, hey, we're treating this like a workout, right? This isn't just like, for quality. We're doing this AMRAP of 3 handstand push-ups, 6 push-ups, and 28 double unders, and you're just going as fast as you can through that. And it's like, man, that feels like a Metcon. Yes, it's supposed to, but we're building local endurance.
But technically less intense. Right, to go back to Dom's point, right?
Because you're getting stuck a little bit.
Exactly, it's you're getting bottlenecked, right? So the intensity is actually going down relative to VO2 max. So let's just say, right, like if we're going to define intensity that way when we're talking about how hard you're working. Yeah, I just like a little point like you made earlier. Why do we not do that more in general fitness? If you want somebody to go intense, well then you would put antagonist movements together, movements that don't compete, so you don't have to slow down. Whereas I was just thinking, like, what's crazy is I 100% agree, but until you get to like games level, and then they just make everything intense still because it doesn't even bottleneck them, and obviously that's where you want to get in the sport, where like, I can do handstand push-ups and regular push-ups and burpees in the same workout, and I can just fly through all of them. Most of us probably won't get there, but you still need to have some touches if you plan to do a competition.
I mean, I think we even saw it at the games this year on the handstand push-up workout that had the sled in between, but it was like kipping handstand push-up, strict handstand push-up, and then the freestanding. And how many people fail the freestanding because they don't have the muscular endurance. Yeah. A lot of them have the position and the mechanics. Not all of them. Some of them definitely needed some work on just like freestanding handstand push-ups in general. But I saw people that I know are very good at freestanding handstand push-ups completely implode by the time they got there because of a muscular endurance issue.
Here's another great example, and I'll throw this at you guys, maybe ways that you could improve this is we think of muscular endurance as just the handstand push-up, but what about the lunge GHD workout from semifinals where so many people failed because they could no longer hold the dumbbells overhead? I mean, that's such a hard movement, especially when you're lunging, but that's also muscular endurance, like being able to stabilize for 20 straight steps or 18, going all the way down. Like, people got wrecked by that workout.
And I know this also sounds crazy, but in that workout, the amount of people that said like their arms going overhead and swinging during the GHD sit-up and how much that affected the lunge is like not things people are thinking about. And I feel like the first time muscular endurance like rocked the CrossFit world was that quarterfinal workout with the GHD pistol rope climb. Oh, yeah. And like all of a sudden people were like, I can't lift my legs to hook my feet. And then like every year since that, we've had like some serious muscular endurance workouts, not just like of that movement pattern, but we had like the quarterfinal gymnastics workout last year.
Yeah.
Right. And then this year, like really that Tota bar rope climb row, not for everybody. Like you said, the elite are able to push the intensity, but those like bubble level athletes, they're getting to that workout and their grip or their core is just absolutely smoked.
Well, even for the elites though, right? Because, I mean, you said it, like you test elite athletes VO2 max, right? And they're not all that impressive relative to like an endurance athlete, but I wonder how much variance we would see amongst elite athletes in VO2 max. I bet you it would be pretty similar. Like I bet you the top 50 men and women are all within in the same ballpark. I don't know what you would think.
Yeah, I'm sure that they
I think the differentiator really comes down to, yes, movement economy, but we can't just keep saying it is muscle endurance due to better or worse movement economy or just pure muscle endurance on its own.
Yeah. I mean, you know, what's crazy, and for those that maybe have learned about how VO2 max is measured will hate this because the studies are kind of all over the place. But, you know, with your VO2 max, most people say it was just cardiac output, which is essentially like, you know, how much blood you get in your body or in your heart and pushing it out. But muscle endurance and respiratory limitations play a role in that. Like if you can't get enough air in, and if you can't actually utilize the oxygen, that's going to lower your VO2 max. So muscular endurance plays a big role in improving your VO2 max. This is just a side tangent.
Yeah.
Cool. How about lower muscular endurance? What do you guys do for that? If someone's quads blow up or their lower back blows up every time they do a deadlift burpee workout?
I think the lower back is where you take a different approach, right?
That's a huge one I see in our sport is people always being like the deadlift burpee or even like a deadlift squat pattern, like a deadlift wall ball really seems to like get people. What do you guys do with that?
I think it goes back to I would think most of the time it's poor patterns, right?
For sure.
Poor movement patterns that are causing the low back to blow up. That's where my mind goes initially. It's like, because of that interference is causing you to now stop knowing how to like use your butt and actually hinge at your hips appropriately. You talk about breathing too, breathing. Exactly. Like breathing in your diaphragm, and you know it's going to act like a corset around your spine. That's where my mind goes first with hinging. And maybe I'm actually like thinking out loud with you guys as we're talking about this. It's almost like, you know, it's funny how whenever we talk about muscle endurance with hinging and low back blowing up, I go back to that nice progression of like the basics, like, hey, are they moving well? You know, and so on and so forth. But every other movement pattern, I don't go there right off the bat. My mind latches right on to like, dude, what are the protocols I'm going to give them to improve their muscular endurance? Which just goes to show like how important it is to keep coming back to the basics.
Go back to
handstand push-up is no different, right? Like, are they moving poorly to begin with? Especially in a kipping handstand push-up, which we don't see that often anymore. But when we do, people get exposed.
Yeah.
So.
And I feel like I see it a ton in movements that require like you to hold extension, and then when you move into flexion for lower back specifically, like even a kipping version of Diane tends to blow people's lower backs up, even though it's lower pull, upper push because of the kip. Mm-hmm. So the kip pattern of the hip flexion paired with the extension in the deadlift. And I feel like I'm seeing that more and more, especially in like higher level athletes actually, is they cannot handle like a squat pattern with a extension pattern.
Yeah, it used to light me up like a wall ball, power clean, wall ball
that
deadlift.
55s in the open, the deadlift, wall ball, row, kipping handstand push-up.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That was just a lower back workout for me the first time I did it. I like couldn't even do a wall ball.
Yeah. Going back to kind of like what's limiting the muscular endurance is you have intramuscular mechanical pressure that's not allowing blood to get to the area, which essentially is not allowing oxygen to get to the area. So that's why I talked about strength being a limitation and movement limitations, because if you're squeezing really hard, like if I am squeezing my biceps as hard as I can, I'm basically creating occlusion where blood can't get there. So a lot of times the same thing's happening with the low back. Like as you're hinging over, because you're not breathing well or poor movement patterns, you're creating this like a ton of pressure in the low back, a ton of pressure in the glutes or whatever's blowing up on you, and then blood can't get to that area correctly. So I still go back to the basics. Jake, you talked about this already, but I will start with something very simple. They're doing, I know this sounds crazy, but 10 by 10 Jefferson curls at a really light load, or they're doing seated good mornings at a really light load, and we'll just build some endurance in those positions first, but that expose them to these really deep in ranges. And then we start to bridge that into more kind of quote-unquote capacity work. Maybe it's Jefferson curls into some deadlifts. Again, people are like, well, that's crazy. A Jefferson curls, you're getting this crazy flexion and then slowly extending.
Welcome to CrossFit.
Welcome to CrossFit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they'll do, I mean, sandbag clean's a great one. I'll have people that'll grab a light sandbag from a seated position on a bench. They're basically hanging off the bench, and it's like a good morning where they're pulling it up and pulling it back down. But they may do 10 reps there, rest 30 seconds, and now they got to do 15 deadlifts at 135.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, it's like we do sandbag cleans and GHC setups in a workout. It's like, dude, like you got to be ready. I mean,
right. But the point being is like you can be creative and like start playing around with all these different implements, but isolate it first, build some endurance there, and then eventually we'll get back to, okay, now let's start testing it in workouts where it is, you know, whatever, a rope climb and a GHD and a deadlift where all these things maybe have these like rapid flexion and extension patterns.
Once you notice somebody's moving well, one thing I found to be helpful too, in particular with the low back, physically, and then also even just building confidence, is starting like really low load, but very high rep. You know, so literally just starting with 53-pound Russian kettlebell swings in a workout, right? Doing 150 of them, 200 of them, right? And then just titrating up that load over time.
Yeah.
I also think keeping with the low back is helpful to almost have more variance, right? More not novel patterns, because there's probably things that people have done before, but like less of a linear progression week to week. Once I do get into, hey, I know they're moving well, I'm going to build this up, because we know how much the brain, you know, plays a role in psychosomatic pain in the back in particular, right? So it's just, I think, getting people to do pattern, like instead of just being like, hey, we're going to do this like 12-week deadlift muscle endurance progression, right? Just varying it more often. I find I see better results with that.
Louis Simmons would be proud.
Yeah. Well, Dom is proud.
Yeah. Dom.
Yeah. But see, again, like so it's funny how like the movement pattern for me changes my approach, which I think in some cases it should, like we're saying with the low back, but I need, as I'm having this conversation, it's like, dude, I need to go back to those principles and the basics and build from there.
Yeah.
So
cool. Let's do a little like a fun rapid fire, just like some fun progressions that people can start to play around with. Maybe we just use something simple like upper body press. You talked about some different examples, and I love using it where maybe they start with the most complex and challenging, and then we kind of slowly decrease the complexity. So a perfect example is maybe they start with 7 strict handstand push-ups, and then they rest 30 seconds, and it's 14 kipping handstand push-ups, and they rest 30 seconds, now it's 21 hand release push-ups or 21 push-ups, rest to recovery, repeat that for 3 sets. Like that's a super simple example anyone can do that has a base of endurance, but essentially you're starting with the movement that's going to be the hardest, and you're getting to the easiest movement, so you're almost doing like a drop set in that way.
Dude, let's go. Oh, this is the fun stuff. Like a strip set, like, you know, bench press, but let's apply to a handstand push-up. So a strip set would be, you know, you hit, and this could be all over the place, X amount of bench presses, right? Strip 10 pounds off, go again, strip 10 pounds off, go again. You could do that with deficit handstand push-ups, right? I'm going to have a couple plates set. You could do a bunch of like, you know, a couple 25s or whatever. You could do 3 sets, like 2 25s, deficit, let's just say kipping, to like 1 rep shy of failure, take a 25, rest 30 seconds, go again, take a 25. Now you're just hands on the ground, you know, go close to failure, rest 3-4 minutes, do it 2 to 3 times. That would be like a strip set example. Dom, good, boom, give us one.
Yeah, that's so good. I actually do that all the time. I've even done like, if people can't even get a strict handstand push-up and we're working on some muscular endurance stuff, doing like all piked from a box.
Yeah.
And just done like to the floor, or like with a deficit to the floor, and then like actually to a riser even. Like just an ab mat.
Yeah, I love it because it's still a way that they can express their fullest potential. Like maybe I can't do a strict handstand push-up, but now Dom has me on a box where I can still get that movement pattern, build some endurance in that position.
Pre-exhaust is a good one too, right? Like, which we don't understand well. I think a lot of people misunderstand pre-exhaust, where we think like, you know, for a handstand push-up, again, it's like if whatever, you have to identify what is a lagging muscle group, and we were talking about it this morning. I'm going to say the vast majority of people, it's their triceps, right? Yeah. Because it's still technically kind of a partial press. So I'm going to blow somebody's shoulders out, right? So that when they're doing handstand push-ups, they're going to be forced to use their triceps more. So for example, I'm going to do, I think like a dumbbell front/lateral raise is the best example. Like just crank out a bunch. Hey, you're going to hit the microphone. Just crank out a bunch, rest 30 seconds, hop up, do handstand push-ups, close to failure, right? And now you're forced to use your tricep more. You could go post-exhaust. They don't really do that in bodybuilding much anymore. But you could do it the other way, where you're
handstand push-up into
tricep extensions. Exactly. Yeah.
I've done that with I've done a progression of that with like dumbbell rollovers.
Yeah.
You do like a max set -2 of handstand push-up, and then you do like 20 dumbbell rollovers.
I think a great thing to do too with building muscle endurance, and we talked about this oh gosh, I can't remember. We have so many conversations behind the scenes about programming. I'm like, I don't remember who I talked to this about and like when we did. I think it was maybe the Sean's podcast where we were mentioning like at what point, why do you do the seated pin press? Like at what point do you do it? So maybe if you're somebody who can go, man, I only have 5 strict handstand push-up. So my work, like my main piece of that day is working on strength endurance. I'm not quite 8+ reps. So I'm doing stuff like 3 reps by 5 sets, strict handstand push-up. Yep. But that's only 15 reps. But like workouts, I got to be ready to do 30 plus. How do I do it? Well, then giving them that accessory piece, right, of the seated pin press and letting them do some serious like muscle endurance with that seated pin press to mimic the movement pattern in a way where they can still overload it.
Yeah. So you're saying you would still start with the handstand push-ups, you get your 3 reps by 5 sets, and then we're going to do muscular endurance work with the seated pin press.
Yeah, maybe we do strip sets with the seated pin press, which would be awful, but awesome.
Yeah.
So
yeah, one of my other favorites, for those that I've coached you've seen this before, but like it essentially is the shock method, this Charles Poliquin. You'll do 6 reps at something, you'll rest 30 seconds, 12 reps at something, rest 30 seconds, and then 25 is what he does. I do 24 because I just can't get it out of my head. It's got to be even. It's got to be a CrossFit.
I actually had a couple of people doing it here, and Rich was like, we're doing 24. We can't do 25.
Yeah. 25 drives me nuts. I don't know why.
I don't know why he did that.
But there's some ways that you can be strategic about it. So I kind of used that example already with the 7 and 14 and 21 with the handstand push-ups, but it could be 6 heavy pieces of 6 strict press at a really heavy load, or 6 bench press at a really heavy load, rest 30 seconds, 12 strict handstand push-ups for someone that's good enough to do that many reps, rest 30 seconds. And then it could even be like, let's change it, a minute AMRAP of handstand walk distance. So now we're getting more sport specific. Then we rest to recovery and repeat that for 3 sets. There's ways that you can create these fun, challenging workouts that have some interference in it, but we're still basically isolating the thing we want to work on.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's it. Yeah. Man, I could riff on.
Yeah.
That's a fun
part
for me.
I was just thinking of doing the same thing like with pulling, like doing like strict chest to bar AMRAP, strict pull-up AMRAP, and then like a banded pull-up AMRAP.
Yep.
Or like you can literally do it with anything.
I actually messed with some strict banded pull-ups for like burnout sets.
Dude, they're so hard.
A few weeks ago at like a hotel. Dude, it was awful. Like 3 sets of 20 supinated. Like, I mean, Madeline was actually hating on me as I was doing them. She's like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "You freaking try these!" Like, but I mean, it was terrible. Yeah. So that got me thinking a little bit. I was like, "Man, why aren't we using?" I mean, I need to bust those out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So
it's a great way to build volume, in particular in a sport where it requires the volume.
Yes.
Like even if it's on a deload week, okay, I still want to get 3 sets of 20 rep banded pull ups so that I'm ready when I have to do 20 chest to bars next week.
Yep.
It's an easy way to do that.
Cool.
I love even throwing in like if I'm doing an upper muscular endurance, and you've seen me do this too, of like a reverse bench pull down with a band.
Oh yeah.
Like a 2-minute AMRAP.
Yes. Yeah.
Like one time, as many reps as you can. It's something I've seen a lot of like gross success with. And it's just like a super easy movement, or even like a double banded lat pull down.
Yeah.
And you just do like, you have like 150 for time.
Well, the nice thing with that, using accommodating resistance, is that you're going to have less muscle damage, right? Like less eccentrics, less muscle damage. It's just easier. You get like a lot of good volume with just better recovery, right? Yeah. So you can.
I need that in my life.
Yeah.
And you've seen me use that for hinging too. Remember that one?
The
like
banded good morning.
Yeah, the banded good morning set where it was like 175-50.
Yes.
And I forgot what it was paired with, like banded glute bridge.
Do we want to
like 100 of each, 75 of each, 50 of each?
Could we cap it? Maybe this could be a podcast on its own, where it's like, do your accessory training right. Should we save that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we should definitely save that. Stop being soft. Push yourself harder. We'll talk about it more in depth later.
Maybe we can close muscular endurance on like when you have muscular endurance programmed, it's not for quality. It can be if your coach prescribes it like that, but you shouldn't just be treating your 3-minute AMRAP, 2-minute rest, or your MAP intervals or your CrossFit workouts with intensity. Like, you guys need to bring the same focus to your muscular endurance, because if you treat your muscular endurance as skill all the time, you're not going to get what you probably want out of it.
If you think you can do it on 150 to 200 grams of carbs a day, you're pissing in the wind.
I knew you're going to fill that in.
Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Cool. All right, guys.